Final Fantasy VII Remake is finally out, and I have been playing it non-stop since it released last Friday. First and foremost, I am spilling all the beans and leaving no spoiler unturned, so if that bothers you or you haven't finished FF7 Remake yet, I would highly recommend doing so before watching the video. So go on now! Run and beat the game, but then you make sure you come back so we can argue about that ending. Moving on, to the 5 of you who don't know out there, Final Fantasy VII Remake is a remake of the PlayStation 1 classic Final Fantasy VII. Honestly, one of my favorite JRPGs and games of all time, and a lot of people agree with me. The original game has sold well over 11 million copies at this point, practically solidified JRPG's place in Western gaming culture, and technologically pushed what was possible with 3D graphics at the time. Seriously, some of these cutscenes are the things that lo-fi 24/7 synthwave to aesthetic to videos are made of. And, well, obviously these don't look anywhere near the visual fidelity we can get to nowadays, but this was some groundbreaking 3D technology that Squaresoft was using, and there really was nothing else like it at the time. Unlike what the 1997 American commercial would make you think, though,
the most anticipated epic adventure of the year will never come to a theater near you.
These cutscenes really only took up a small portion of the game, and most of it was spent doing this. Walking these little 3D models around these hand-drawn 2D environments, and while the blocky polygonal structure of the characters looks sharp enough to cut your finger on, the 2D environments totally hold up to this day and age, and I think still look beautiful in just about any context. Now, instead of just looking at a flat plane, they could utilize sweeping camera motions and jaw-dropping visuals to show off a more cinematic presentation during fights. I'm a total sucker for classic pixel art in games like Final Fantasy VI and Chrono Trigger, but there really is no contest after watching Sephiroth pull a meteor from space, only to crash through every planet in our solar system, only to cause damage to your party. First time I saw that, I pissed myself, it was so rad. Final Fantasy is cool, everybody loves it all over, and it cemented mine and many others' love for this kaiju and this motorcycle, and you get it. Now we jump to E3 2015 when SquareEnix finally announced that they were working on a remake of the PlayStation 1 classic after fans begged for years, and it will be coming to a modern console near you. You know, sometime. Eventually.
Yeah!
So 5 more years later, we arrive at last week on Friday. I got it all preloaded on the PlayStation. I am impatiently sweating out the last couple hours before launch by capturing some footage of the original for this video. And there it goes, 10 PM MST, it unlocks. I put my headphones on, cranked up the volume, and
my body is ready.
34 hours later, I roll on the credits, and wow. What a spectacular and surreal experience Final Fantasy VII Remake has been. I thoroughly enjoyed my time spent with this game, and with an ending as controversial as this, the game will surely be remembered. Some story elements like the whispers seem a little unnecessary, and while I like the ending and where they are deciding to take the remake, I definitely understand why a lot of people, especially some longtime fans of the series, may feel like this isn't what they expected. It should be explained that the remake portion of the title pertains less to the game being a remake of the original game, and is sort of a fourth wall breaking nod to the fact that you are actually quite literally remaking the story of Final Fantasy VII. Throughout the runtime of the game, these ghostly creatures that were not in the original PlayStation 1 game, just a little BTW for all of you who are new to this, are trying to make sure that the events of Final Fantasy VII take place as they were supposed to. As you play, there are small moments where the story changes, like when Barret is brought back to life by the Whispers, and then it all culminates at the end when Sephiroth tears a hole in reality, and with the help of Aerith you travel to an alternate dimension of Midgar, where you do battle with Destiny himself, and one last battle with Sephiroth. The whole sequence of events is intense, to say the least, and sets it up so that the developers can really do whatever they want with the story of Final Fantasy VII at this point. The whole thing reminds me a lot of the J.J. Abrams Star Trek films, as a lot of other people have mentioned online, and personally, I think it's a genius idea on their end. I can't imagine the team finds it all that interesting to work on the same thing that has already been done before, and probably have a lot of new ideas about how to use this world and characters to make something fresh. While I would have been totally fine with a 1-to-1 remake, this is far more exciting to see what they're gonna do the next time around with Part 2, instead of just relying on the nostalgia of the whole thing to keep the conversation moving. From here on, I would absolutely expect them to take full advantage of this freedom too. We will most likely still meet all the same characters and hit the same big story moments, but I would expect something very different from what we see from the original game. One of the biggest changes that comes to mind is whether they will decide to kill Aerith off this time or not. And while I think the obvious answer is that they probably will find a way to keep her around, I would love to see them keep playing with expectations, and if you're really going to do this, do it big. The overall quality oozing from this game doesn't end here though. One of the best parts is the new combat system that they have put together for Final Fantasy VII Remake. SquareEnix has been having trouble converting their tight turn-based combat into a more action-oriented form for a long time now, and it's never felt quite right. Using an almost Kingdom Hearts-like action and command-centered combat with a tweaked stagger system they ripped straight out of FF13, the combat is very addictive. Figuring out the best way to take down your opponent based on their weaknesses and getting their stagger gauge filled has almost a puzzle-like quality to it, and on top of the boss design being out of this world visually and mechanically, almost every enemy clearly choreographs their movements so that you can take the needed actions to counter it. Within no time, you'll be settling into the frantic pace of swapping between party members, popping off abilities when your ATB gauge fills, and flipping in and out of battles at a silky smooth pace. Tifa in particular stands out to me as an insanely enjoyable character to play. Getting the hang of keeping her abilities up and feeling each hit land on the enemy feels great. On top of that, outside of battle, they give you limitless options for customizing your various party members just about any way you'd like to with the materia system, which not only functions the exact same way as it used to, but still totally holds up as a solid way to experiment with various ways to play each character and get the most out of whatever build you decide to roll with. Each materia also has various levels that can be reached through occurring AP in battle, as well as each weapon having a special skill that can be permanently learned, and a grid sphere-like weapon upgrade system that provides further customization through special buffs like more attack, or even stuff like lifesteal. All the systems do wonders for creating an addictive loop that will have you doing just one more battle before bed every night. It's quite possibly the best battle system that SquareEnix has ever come up with, and now that they got this down, I expect great things to come from the tweaks they make to the formula for other titles in this series and the franchise as a whole. Before we move past combat though, I frankly thought it would be a sin to not delve a little further into enemy design. Really, the sheer amount of assets in this game is outstanding. You can really see why it took so long to make this game. Each area of Midgar is littered with new models and textures to ogle at, and so many different boss battles and enemies, almost no two battles feel the same. Even the Hell House, a weird enemy that you would not expect to see them keep around, makes an appearance as the last boss you face off against in the Colosseum. It is exactly as weird as it sounds. There are so many moments in this game that feel straight up surreal. The developers of Final Fantasy VII Remake embrace the weirdness and know exactly how to utilize these smaller moments from the original and still incorporate them in a way that makes sense with the world and ideas that Final Fantasy VII has already laid down. All the big story moments can be found in Final Fantasy VII Remake, except that the initial 10 hours or so that would normally take place on the first disc of the PS1 game has been expanded to about 35 hours here. If you don't know, or it wasn't apparent by this point, Final Fantasy VII Remake is not the entirety of Final Fantasy VII, only the first third or so of the game. That all being said, to get the 35-hour runtime, they have added a lot of new content that was not there in the original, as well as fleshing out some of the side characters to have deeper emotions and connections to the overarching story at hand. And they totally pulled this off. I laughed, I cried, and I was enthralled in everyone's motivations, even though I kind of already knew what was going to be coming next for the most part. This is further enhanced by the outstanding cast of voice actors they have picked up. When paired with the highly cinematic, almost Kojima-esque camera work that is done during cutscenes, it really elevates the whole product to a level of polish that you don't even see in most AAA games. Especially as you rocket your way toward the ending hours of the game, the tension starts to ratchet up and shit hits the fan. The whole experience really is a ride from beginning to end. Now, a couple things that do worry me about the future of Final Fantasy VII Remake is the addition of the Whispers and the obvious one, which is the ending. I see a lot of Kingdom Hearts DNA in this game, from the combat system to the overly explained bullshit, it is all there. Luckily, most of this dribble is left for the last hour or two of the game, which is great. The fourth wall breaking meta explanation for the Whispers trying to keep the story happening as it did in Final Fantasy VII, and traveling between alternate realities to stop Sephiroth all just seems like an over-explanation for what could have just been a kick-ass fight with Sephiroth, giving Cloud and crew a reason to go after and stop him. Like I said earlier though, I understand the want to just not copy a popular piece of work, kinda make it your own, and frankly, how they went about this is just genius in my eyes. That all being said, I definitely can still understand how many out there feel as though they were misled, especially if you were just expecting a real remake as the title suggests, and not some Kingdom Hearts f***ery. The real question now is, what's gonna happen next? Where will the team decide to take the game? Personally, I think they're going to take advantage of the creative freedom, and I would not expect the same Final Fantasy VII you know and love from here on out. Whether or not the next product is good or not, I am very excited to see what they decide to do and what crazy they plan on showing me next. If you like RPGs, I would totally recommend this title. You will find more than enough to satisfy your combat and number fixes here, and it's without a doubt one of the best modern JRPGs out there right now, with enough polish and content to satisfy just about anyone. If you're a fan of the original game, you may be a little bummed with how the ending turns out if you were going in with some expectations, but between the sweet and cozy nostalgia blanket comforting you through your playthrough, enough new content here for anyone with an interest in the story and characters to get something new out of their time with the game, and some of the most jaw-dropping visuals in the industry right now, I would highly recommend you give Final Fantasy VII Remake a shot, and I'm giving it 5 cross-dressing clouds out of 5.